Imagine waking up in a world where the map looks familiar, but nothing is the same. You open a history book and suddenly the United States does not exist. No stars and stripes, no Declaration of Independence, no presidents, no Washington, D.C., no Hollywood, no Silicon Valley. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. Instead, the entire North American continent is painted in the deep red of the British Empire. The year is modern, but the world has taken a completely different path. And the story of how it happens begins long before you and I were ever born. The question is simple, but the consequences are massive. What if the British Empire never lost the American colonies? To understand this alternate timeline, we have to travel back to a moment when everything hung by a thread. A moment when one decision, one hesitation, one lost battle could have changed the fate of the world. It begins in the 1760s, when tension between the colonies and Britain was rising like pressure inside a volcano. Taxes were increasing. Protests were spreading. The American colonists felt unheard and controlled. But imagine, just for a moment, the British government acted differently. Imagine instead of pushing harder, they listened. They removed the harsh taxes. They gave the colonies more representation. They slowed the march toward rebellion just enough to stop the spark from catching fire. And instead of war, the colonies stayed loyal. Suddenly, the map shifts. 13 colonies remain under the Crown. No Declaration of Independence is written. No patriot army is formed. George Washington becomes a respected officer, but never a revolutionary hero. Benjamin Franklin becomes a political negotiator inside the empire, not a founding father. The names you know still exist, but their stories are completely rewritten. At first, life in the colonies feels almost the same. People farm, trade, build towns, and push westward. But something is different in the air. Without a revolution, the idea of American identity grows slowly, under British influence, not against it. English culture, British law, and the monarchy shape daily life for generations. By the early 1800s, while the real United States would have been expanding rapidly, the British-controlled America expands even faster. Now imagine Britain owning not only the East Coast, but also controlling the territories gained after the 7 Years' War. Canada and the colonies merge economically. British America stretches from the frozen Atlantic of Newfoundland all the way down to the warm fields of Georgia. And here is where things get suspenseful. When Napoleon rises in Europe and begins reshaping the continent, the British Empire in our world is already powerful. But in this alternate world, with the American colonies giving Britain millions of extra people, huge amounts of food, timber, and money, the empire becomes almost unstoppable. Imagine British ships built with American lumber. Imagine British soldiers fed with American wheat. Imagine British factories powered by American cotton years earlier and at a larger scale. Napoleon's chances shrink dramatically. The British might even defeat him sooner. Europe could stabilise under British influence, not French. And as Britain gets stronger, the colonies across the Atlantic change rapidly. But what about the biggest issue of early America, slavery? This is where the timeline gets complicated. In the real world, the British Empire abolished slavery in 1833, long before the American Civil War. If the colonies remained under British rule, slavery would likely still be banned across these territories. But ending slavery under an empire, not a war, could be a slower, more tense process. Southern plantation owners might resist, some might rebel. But with the full force of the British Empire behind abolition, these rebellions would be crushed quickly. There would be no 4-year civil war, no mass loss of life, no Abraham Lincoln, but also no independent nation healing itself through internal struggle. Instead, the moral direction of the future is dictated from London. As the 1800s turn into the 1900s, the world edges toward the 2 world wars. Now imagine what World War I looks like if North America fights as part of the British Empire. Millions more soldiers fight under the Union Jack. The Central Powers struggle against not one, but a truly global empire. The war might end earlier, the map of Europe might be drawn differently. Countries like Germany and Austria might be forced into even stricter conditions. And without an independent United States to become a major global power afterward, the British Empire becomes the world's #1 superpower without question. Now picture World War II. Without an independent USA, there is no Roosevelt presidency, no American economic boom, no Pearl Harbor pushing a reluctant nation into the fight. But that doesn't mean North America stays out. Instead, millions of British Americans join the war automatically, because the empire is one unified political system. Supplies, weapons, food and manpower from Canadian and American territories flood into British control. The empire becomes the backbone of the Allied forces. The war may still be brutal, but Hitler faces a united empire that spans every ocean. D-Day might still happen, but with overwhelming force from Britain's superempire, Europe might be liberated faster. And after the war, the world does not split into American and Soviet spheres. Instead, it becomes British versus Soviet. But what does daily life look like in this alternate America? That is where things get truly interesting. Imagine cities like New York, Boston, Philadelphia, and Chicago as major centres of British culture. Red phone boxes, British accents, and parliamentary politics become normal across a continent. Holidays like the 4th of July never exist. Instead, people celebrate the King's birthday. The British pound, not the dollar, becomes the key currency across half the world. Technology and culture look different too. The British Empire would control Hollywood, meaning movies, music and media grow under British values and storytelling. Jazz, rock and hip-hop might still exist, but the industry behind them would be shaped by London and British-American cooperation. Silicon Valley as we know it might never be born, or it might emerge under a different identity, creating a world where new technology is guided by imperial policy. In this world, independence movements would still rise, but not just in North America. The British Empire is stretched across India, Africa, the Caribbean, Australia, and the Middle East. Some of these regions might push for freedom, some might succeed, but with America on Britain's side, these struggles become harder for rebels. The empire's power lasts longer. It may even survive into the present day as a massive global federation, something like a United Kingdom of the world. Back in North America, politics looks nothing like democracy today. Instead of a president, you get a Prime Minister of British America. Instead of states, there are provinces. Instead of the Constitution, there's a set of British written laws shaped over centuries. People still argue, elections still happen, but the ultimate authority remains the Crown. Some would love it, some would hate it, but everyone would live under it. Now imagine yourself travelling through this alternate America today. You walk through New York City and see the British flag flying above government buildings. Taxis are still yellow, but they accept British currency. News reporters speak with a mix of American and British accents. People stand in long lines, queues, not lines, because British culture shapes the little things. And instead of the modern United States military, you see the British-American Corps working with bases across the world as part of the imperial military. Schools teach a different history. Children learn more about British kings and queens than about George Washington or Thomas Jefferson. There's no Revolutionary War unit in textbooks. Instead, history lessons talk about the Great North Atlantic Partnership between Britain and its American territories. The world feels familiar, yet completely different. More structured, more unified, more controlled, and maybe less free in some ways, but perhaps also less divided. Because without 50 states acting independently, decisions come from one central government. That can be a strength or a weakness. Finally, imagine how today's global politics would look. There is no United Nations as we know it, because the balance of power is different. There is no Cold War between two giants. Instead, there is a long, tense rivalry between the British-led world and the Soviet Union, stretching from the 1950s onward. Without America's unique culture of innovation, the space race might be slower. The moon landing might happen later, or be carried out by a British-American astronaut instead of NASA. And the world's economy becomes deeply tied to the British system. English law dominates international business. British banking rules shape global finance. The world's most powerful companies are not American giants, but British-American corporations. The biggest question is, would people living inside this British-American empire be happier or less happy? It's impossible to know. Some would enjoy stability, some would miss freedom, some would want independence and fight for it. The empire might eventually evolve into a peaceful federation, like a giant version of modern Canada. Or it might fracture under its own weight. But one thing is certain. If the British Empire had kept the American colonies, the world we live in today would not just look different, it would feel different. Every part of our lives, from culture to technology to war to politics, would be shaped by a single moment in history where rebellion almost happened, but never did. History turns on moments like this, and sometimes imagining the world that might have been tells us more about the world we live in now.